Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to another Sedaru Live. I'm Adam Simonson, Director of Enterprise Solutions for Sedaru. And Kevin Koshko, you're on the line with us, Kevin. How are you?
I'm here. How's it going, man?
It's going good. It's going good. Kevin's our Sedaru Chief Product Officer. Today, for this webinar, we're going to talk. The title is A Match Made in Heaven. Some people think that refers to Kevin and I, but what we're actually going to be talking about today is how the blending of real-time data, sensor information, et cetera, with your work orders and, in general, maintenance management strategies. So right up our alley. Should be a good topic, don't you think, Kevin?
I do. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of what Sedaru is all about. Being able to tie in with all the different business systems and do something that's actually useful with it. So looking forward to you walking us through some of those tools, and I'll jump into the mobile app towards the end, and we can see how that gets applied out to the field.
Awesome. Yep. No, absolutely. I think it'll be good. And we're targeting, this should be, 30 minutes. We'll make sure we leave time for questions as well in there. If you don't already, look for us on social media, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter. We actually do a periodic podcast as well too that hits on some of these industry topics. So look for that on your favorite podcast application. You'll notice in your webinar interface, there's a spot for you to ask questions. Make liberal use of that. We certainly want to, these things are always more fun when we get lots of questions from you guys. So feel free to type your questions in there as we're talking through things, and we'll do our best to address those. This week coming up, it's Monday the 11th, I guess, right? And so Valentine's Day is this week. That was really the Match Made in Heaven theme as well too. So we're all excited for that. I'm sure you probably have something really extravagant planned, right, Kevin?
I wouldn't say it's extravagant, but I did have to plan a little bit. Going out to dinner on Valentine's Day can usually be pretty tricky, like getting reservations. So we went ahead and booked that a couple weeks ago, but it'll be fun. Like I got the Italian restaurant reservations for 4, so it will be Sarah and I and the 2 kids. So it should be fun, little Italian restaurant. But now I don't know. Have you ever I just recall kind of back in the dating days when you and your significant other would go to a restaurant, and it was just they would pack people in obnoxiously. It was for whatever reason they found 100 more tables that they just put together, and it was you're on the lap of the next person. So I'm hoping it's not going to be like that on Thursday, but we'll see.
Well, you'll at least have a buffer of a couple children there.
Right.
At a minimum, you'll ruin somebody else's Valentine's Day there.
That's right. We'll use the kids as a force field. I think we'll be good.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah, it's probably the least favorite of my Hallmark holidays. So I think the only person in my household who's going out is my daughter. Has a party at her elementary school. So under the guise of everybody else can go out while they watch your kids, but she's the only one that actually wants to attend and do anything. So she's going to have a fun Valentine's Day, I guess. Well, the rest of us we'll do something fun at home, but it's not the big night of the year for us to go out.
Yeah, makes sense.
But let's dive into some things where you can really get serious about some other things that I love in the world here. Namely, we're going to talk about Sedaru. I'm going to start here in our Omni application, which I think those of you that have been on this before are probably familiar with this a little bit. But I'll kind of give you the overview, and we're going to talk here a little bit about how this blends in real-time information and what you can do with it. And for those of you that don't know, one of the original guiding ideas behind Sedaru was this idea of connecting data systems across the utility, like Kevin said, this sort of meat and potatoes idea, because oftentimes we're collecting data, whether it's electronically, whether it's on paper, whether it's through a SCADA system, and it ends up living in separate places. So then when we want to use that information, we're forced to go from one place to another place to another place, and it doesn't necessarily make any of our decision making any better. And I think, you know, it's what you see here across the top. These what we call performance tiles are really one of the first ways in terms of letting you see this different information all together in one place, right? So I'm looking at water line repairs that have been made, hydrant work orders, valve information. This purple tile that I'm looking at here is all related around meter information. So for example, we can take Sedaru and it can tie into your metering system, right? So oftentimes our meter system is certainly always tied to the billing system. We're using it for generating bills and consuming that read information, right? But let me scroll through here and I'll show you an example here of now we're talking about how do we leverage AMI information. And so I can directly pull this leak information. So I scroll through that tile, I see that there, and I can go right here and see a list of everybody that's popping up with any kind of continuous leak that's showing up. I'll click on the little location piece of it, and it's going to zoom me right into the location of that individual item. Let me see what's going on with it, and then let me go ahead and create tasks right from there, right? So being able to really kind of leverage that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think, you know, Kevin, you've seen lots of examples of kind of, I think, poor workflows for how do you manage that meter information through the years, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, especially with, you know, change outs can be really tricky, you know, and how that ties in with the billing system. But just in general, like, you know, there's a lot of people that have AMR. AMI is, you know, it's getting there, it's you know, getting adoption. But, you know, just the way we can connect to, you know, a meter doesn't matter if you have, you know, the full, you know, fixed base system or not. You're still going to be able to, you know, to leverage those alerts, those alarms, and those things that are meaningful. And, you know, with this, it's not just, okay, here's a list of things that I have to worry about. It's like, how can I take action on that? How can I just totally take that, create a work order from it, and now have that, you know, out in the field and be able to take action.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you have conversations with people around asset management, and I'd ask you guys to think about this at your own utility, in your own organization. Oftentimes you hear people say like, yeah, we're going to get started with asset management, or we're deep in asset management. And I'll say, well, what does that mean? And oftentimes they're like, well, we're doing work orders. You know, we're going to start tracking these tasks and this work. And so that's typically like a big operational focus for people, right? You want to do a better job at tracking all the work and activities that you have. Some of that is very asset centric and driven, right? Where you want to make sure that you're taking all that work and applying it directly to the asset. But the other piece of all that and where it changes is how do we incorporate all of our operational data that we have coming in too, right? So incorporate the sensor information, SCADA information, and some of those pieces. So that metering piece is certainly one of those. Another thing that we're doing within Sedaru here is leveraging SCADA information. So you're looking at everything here on a map. I can pretty quickly switch to this trend view. Let me get rid of these. I'll just kind of show you from scratch how you would build these, right? So you come in, and I'm looking at my trend, and I've got these tiles at the top that are all geared around SCADA information, right? And so I'm looking at flow rates at a particular plant that's in the system. I'm looking at, I've got 3 different plants in here that have 4 different plants that have different data. And I want to compare what those might look like over time. So what I'm going to do is I've got plant number 2 here. I'm just going to take that tile. I'm going to drag it right down into here. And so it's showing me what some numbers have looked like over the past day. I'm going to also grab plant 1. I'm going to pull that down into here. So now I'm looking at both of them on the same graph. And let me give us a little more time here. So instead of looking at it over just a day, I'm going to look at it over the course of a month. And so now what I'm looking at here, I'm actually comparing what do the flow rates look like at these 2 different plants, pulling in data from the historian, and how has that varied over the past month. You'll notice that, or I hope you notice at least, that when you go ahead and the way that I built those graphs, I'm just dragging those tiles, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
And I think, and I think you can elaborate on this more. One of our goals when doing this is to make it so that just that average person can create this report from the SCADA information without having to call the IT guy, call the SCADA guy, call the GIS person to say, hey, can you build this report for me, or I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? It's you now have access to those things that required so many steps and so much red tape required to get to that information before. And what that allows is, like here we're seeing a month's worth of SCADA data out of that plant. I mean, this is going to tell us some meaningful things. Seeing those spikes kind of towards the end of January there, we can really correlate that with other things that are going on. And what I like to see also is, sometimes you'll see like a month of SCADA information, you'll see these kind of flow rates, fluctuate, but then you can drag in like the valve exercising done or the hydrant flushing that's happened. And then you see those patterns where, oh, okay, well, we had a ton of flushing take place. No wonder why we're seeing these, ticks in SCADA. But, until you have access to all those systems, it's like impossible to figure that out.
Absolutely.
So being able to drag it in and do what you just did is pretty sweet.
Yeah, or commonly what I'll see is, if you're looking in a pump station, right, and you've got 2, 3, 4 pumps in the pump station, right, and I could quickly have the SCADA tags tied to those pump run times in here as well, and I can look on a month and have it show for me every day what was the runtime of each of those pumps every day, right? So that I can make sure, because operationally sometimes we'll get ourselves into ruts where we're not running some of the pumps as much as we should. Or we'll notice inefficiencies. So any of the sort of operational pieces, this is able to present a lot of that information right to you. And again, present it and do it in such a way that somebody who's your typical operations supervisor can do it without having to have the IT person involved and have to be critical path to getting that information into your hands.
Yeah.
So, really, really powerful. If I switch back to our map, one of the things I'll also share with you here, let me scroll through these tiles. Okay, so there's a tile configured in here. You'll see in the upper left that says active leak sensor alarms this month, right? So what this is showing is in the last 30 days, it's now highlighting on the map for me what are active leak sensor alarms, right? So Sedaru has the ability to tie into some of these different systems that you can deploy out in the field for leak detection and for automated leak detection. And the idea with these is typically you've got sensors out in the field, and then you have software behind the scenes that's correlating the data that's coming out of the sensors to actually give you leak locations. Right, Kevin, am I doing that justice explaining how that kind of works?
Yeah, and what's nice is, so you have a sensor, and a lot of utilities are now investing into these, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a great way for you to be a lot less reactive and a lot more proactive by catching things before it turns into a big problem. And with Sedaru, you're able to easily just access the native information from those sensors. And typically, a lot of those sensors have, alarms and other thresholds that can be set. Sedaru will inherit those, so you can see things like, leak spikes. You can use it for transient detection. I mean, there's just tons of different applications for it. And again, without having to be an expert in whatever leak detection or leak sensor that you have, without having to be an expert in the AMR system or an expert in SCADA, you can access all of it and allow yourself to, really kind of use each piece to guide your decisions and guide your work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So let me show you. This is one of my favorite things I love to do here a little bit too. Is I've got this what looks like could be a leak here. Before I deploy anybody out into the field to look at it, I can do a little bit of investigation here in the office. And so I'm just going to scroll right over here, and this is actually going to bring me right to the same place within my hydraulic model here. So I'm actually now had the ability to run my hydraulic model right from here. And if I select this particular pipe, and I come over here and I hit to this tile that says simulate, I can actually say, let's go ahead and look at and close this pipe. And so I'm just clicking a few buttons there to close it. You see it now highlighted in red on the map for you. And I'll hit run simulation. And so what this actually is doing for me now is running a quick hydraulic simulation for me to show me what are going to be the hydraulic impacts, okay, of actually having that pipe shut down, right? So before I send somebody out there to say, hey, you know what, maybe we want to isolate this or do a more leak investigation, or where do I want to prioritize this versus other things going on in the system, I can run this quick hydraulic analysis. I'll come over here and hit the impact page, right? And we see we're in a really well-looped, I'll zoom out a little bit here. So we're in a really kind of well-looped area of the system of where this leak is, right? So the hydraulic impacts here are pretty, relatively low, right? So you see over on the right, it's showing me, what's going to happen. So certainly the folks in the middle here would be affected, but other folks on the outskirts, not so much, right? Hydraulically, it's not going to have a significant impact on them. So now from an operations perspective, I can feel pretty good about, okay, let's let somebody go out, investigate, look at this thing, and know we're not going to create bigger problems by doing something in here.
Yeah, that's cool. And you didn't have to pay a consultant $5,000 to figure that out. And
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're right. You talk about that, the ease of use piece. It's really the same idea as we think about how do you use your hydraulic model within Sedaru. We don't want you to have to be the world's expert hydraulic modeler to do basic hydraulic analysis. If you work at a water utility every day, doing basic hydraulic analysis should be part of your everyday job. You're doing it one way or another anyway. We're just adding a little bit better software tool in your hands to do that. So if I swipe back over here, I'm back into that sort of central Omni interface, looking at this particular leak sensor here that popped up 5 days ago. And what I'm going to do here, you see the button that says create task, right? And I'll come in here and say, okay, well, what do I want to do? Let's go ahead and we're going to do a leak detection investigation. I want somebody to actually go out there, investigate it. And I'm going to go ahead and just assign that to Kevin, and I'll hit create task there in the lower right. And now that's gone ahead and created that work order for Kevin to be able to tackle out in the field. And so that process of dispatching off of that and doing that, again, is meant to be really straightforward, as simple as possible to be able to see on the screen. And so we want you thinking about your work orders, not just from that, hey, here's this recurring maintenance I've got to do, and what's my asset-driven sort of maintenance priorities, which are important, but how do I use operational data? Because if you're investing in real-time sensors, real-time operational data, AMI information, and you're not having the conversation of how am I going to use that data to make real-time operational decisions, you're probably missing out on a big piece of that return on investment that you were expecting to get from that system.
Yeah, I agree.
Kevin, you want to show us what it's going to look like on the mobile side here?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'll show you a specific example. We talked a lot about some of the water operations and work order and work related to that. The example I want to show like kind of a water and sewer system together, and show you kind of how that can look as well. So
okay.
More of that field verified data, not just water. I mean, with Sedaru, you can utilize it for water, sewer, stormwater, public works. I mean, there's a ton of application for it. But yeah, as it pertains to field work, let's take a look at that in one sec.
And let me, while you're doing that, I'm going to take a crack at a couple questions that have popped up here from folks, right?
Okay.
So one of them was, to see these full flow rates, does that require a full integration of SCADA? It's a really good question, and there's a couple things there I'll sort of unpack while Kevin's sharing his screen. So when we integrate to SCADA with Sedaru, one of the things we're doing is we're tying into that SCADA historian, right? So we're not tying into the live SCADA system per se that's going to have control of the system. And then how we integrate to that historian, it really depends on what SCADA system you're using. For most of the big SCADA vendors out there, the Wonderwares, the iFixes, right? They've got an API. We've got what we call Sedaru Connect, which has developed against those APIs so that we can dynamically consume information from that historian. So doing an integration to those is pretty straightforward. And you typically specify what are the tags from your SCADA system that you then want to make available within Sedaru, and then at what interval you want to see that information, et cetera. And then it will show up in there, and then you can assign work orders and tasks and view the data and do all of it within there. So in general, the integration to those SCADA systems is pretty lightweight. We also will do ODBC level integrations to historians, sometimes depending on if it's another system, and it works in a similar fashion, just a few more steps to kind of get some of the setup going. So in general, we're not looking at, they're not massive integration projects is the short answer to that question.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a bunch of them that are just ready to go. So like Clear SCADA, for example, Wonderware, there's just a ton that we have in place that are ready to roll. So
cool. We can see your screen now, Kevin. It looks good.
Good. All right. So looking at the Sedaru Field Force mobile app. So right now I'm running the Windows tablet version. I tend to mix it up here on these webinars. Sometimes I'll show iPad. Sometimes I'll show Windows device. Sometimes we'll show the phone version. But just wanting to show you some kind of a neat setup here where you have kind of a combined water and sewer workflow all within one login here. So I can swipe these tiles over and actually look at here's some wastewater specific work. Here's some distribution and potable work, and you'll have access to all of that. What's nice is the tiles here within the Field Force app will actually show me how many work orders I have assigned. So I got 8 sewer mains and 39 manholes, and I can see, right here on the map, I can see in a list of active versus completed items, and it's all just in one spot for me. So from here, being able to click on each one, I'm going to go ahead and tap it again to zoom to the extent of all that. And as shared, so here we can see kind of our water and sewer applications together, and we'll start with our first kind of line cleaning work order here. What's nice is if I go back, this can be ordered by like route number or sequence, so it's not just a random list of work orders that you have. It can actually use some data to actually tell you which one to go to next. Which really kind of streamlines that process and can optimize some of those routes for you. And
let me have you answer another question that came in, Kevin.
Yeah.
So if you had the question is basically if you had an emergency kind of work order that popped up from this real-time data, how would that show up in here?
Yeah, so it actually it shows up at the top of this list here. So my active list, when I have a new work order come in, it actually, there's a little animation, these things go down, and then you see like a new one kind of pop up at the top. So it's actually based on priority. Then you'd be able to just select that, and then it'll tell you all the details that you need to worry about.
Right. So from that field perspective, it can certainly be very dynamic. They can be doing their day-to-day normal stuff, and then something from this real-time data pops in, and that can help them reprioritize what they're doing.
Exactly. And what's nice is with Field Force, we've recently introduced a feature where you'll have kind of like an audible notification. So when a new work order comes in, it'll make a chime, and then even a little Windows notification, little pop-up at the bottom that'll make a sound if the device is minimized, or if they're working on email or some other application, it'll still fire that and let them know, hey, you got a new work order, check out Field Force. So
right. Okay, great.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started on our work here, and here we have a real easy to use, easy to fill out data entry form. So we have all the details here. In this case, for line cleaning, we'll have our drainage area, we'll have our to and from manhole. All of these are totally customizable. So depending on what type of information you want to fill in, and then in addition to that, being able to tie into other business systems to pass that data along, or import data maybe from another work order system or a billing system, customer service, etc. So, but easily able to tap on each of these items here. Definitely intended it to be minimal typing, keypad entry and other kind of, pickless entry, really kind of
Like
minimizing them.
you're using a mouse, but you could just as easily be using your finger.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can just be tapping on the screen, or, using a mouse at the, tough book or laptop as well. So super flexible. All right. So with that, then I also have some work order details here that I can also fill out here. So this is going to set the status to my default status, which could be completed or whatever we want it to be. And then, I'm logged in as Peter here, so it's going to select my name when I'm adding in my hours that I spent. And then I can save that, but I can continue to add folks here. So,
right. So if you're the crew leader and you got a crew of 3 guys out there doing stuff, you can punch everybody's time in there quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. So then we'll, add my font as well. And then, there's, different types of hourly rates. So if I want, overtime or double time, all that can be accounted for here. All right. So got some employees added. You can see that. Also, like the materials that we're using. So, if we have, anything that we know that we type in here. So maybe we use a, angle valve, or depending on what type of repair, something that we're using. In case of sewer line jetting, probably not going to be using materials, but you have the flexibility to incorporate that. So what's also nice is it's taking in like the material, the part number, the units that we've been using, and then lastly, the vehicle or equipment. So, we're using the hydrovac here. I can just type in the first couple letters of what I'm looking for, then that list will narrow down for me. So, definitely easy to access what we're trying to get to.
Yep.
Spend a couple hours with that, save it, and off we go. So what that does is now that will mark this one as completed. We can see the 8 sewer mains. It'll go ahead and refresh and take that 8 down to 7. And then that will also incorporate an update to the map as well. So basically, all this is synchronized back to Sedaru Omni. We're going to be able to access that in real time and go from there. So, key is ease of use, ease of access, and again, this may have been tying into a different system. From the field crew's perspective, they had no idea, right? They just had this, easy to use form that they filled out, and then, they're off and running as they enter the work.
Now, it is the another question to answer here, and just I'll give us a little time check here, right? We're coming up on the bottom half of the hour here, so as you guys have other questions, let's go ahead and get those in. We'll try to keep this around 30 minutes. So, but one of the other sort of big pieces of real-time data is that GPS information and the location of your crew. So how does this use that?
Yeah, so this, I have my little GPS cursor here because it's on my desktop machine. Yeah, so it'll take me here to Jasmine Drive here in Arizona. Not a lot of stuff going on where I'm
at. It looks warm. Looks warm there, Kevin.
It's actually perfect right now. Not for long. It's starting in April. It'll get to to death heat, but I can enjoy it while it lasts. So between that, getting the GPS and navigation, but also just some a lot of nice tools, being able to easily search for assets, getting measurements as well. So if I wanted to kind of estimate footages, I can just kind of click from manhole to manhole, and that'll start to take the distance that we have. I can copy that to the clipboard and paste it onto a form if I need that somewhere else. So just a lot of nice tools that are easy to access, but can provide a lot of value.
Yep. No, absolutely. That's great. That's great. So I mean, and it really, I think, and hopefully folks have taken away from this that it really is this easy to kind of be able to roll out some of these work orders to folks, and tying into these different real-time data systems. Sedaru was built from the ground up to do that, right? So it's not an afterthought in terms of thinking about, oh, I'm doing these work orders, but now how do I get this data? Or I do these, I'm doing this, and now how do I want to do this, right? Sedaru was architected with this idea of you have lots of data, you have lots of connecting systems. Well, we want to pull all that together and then do it in an interface that is easy to use and, you know, quite frankly, hopefully enjoyable to use, right? Everybody who's attended here today so far, you're going to get you'll get a follow-up email. Feel free to respond to that email with other questions or thoughts that you have. You might get a follow-up phone call from one of us too, just to kind of check in and make sure that we answered any questions that you have. And then certainly feel free to go out on our website or out to any of our social media areas there too, and ping us from there, and we'll certainly reach out to you.
Yeah.
And then I guess obviously have a great Valentine's Day. Do something fun.
I hope I have as much fun as you do.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Cheers.
We'll see you out there. Thanks.
All right. Bye.